surprise, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was I think one of the coldest lines in all of literature, maybe of all time. Even I would say even as cold as some of our holy texts is what the actor Chow Yun Fat said to the I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the actress's name. She was also equally brilliant. Is that Ronin and talented disciple who was a Ronin who had confiscated the sword that belonged to the master Li Mu Bai, who he was actually trying to get away from that sword. And there's one scene where he's courting the disciple, and he's using her own oversight and maybe unconsciousness, even as she engages with swordplay and high level training that she did outside of structure, according to an arbitrary understanding of a unique training manual that Li Mu Bai's master Southern Crane had been murdered over and stolen from by the tutor of the Ronin. Um, I won't say the tutor's name because she was called in that movie, and so maybe she's called her not named. But she had stolen the manual, and then the tutor didn't understand the manual because she was simply going off the pictures. But the disciple was from a noble background in ancient times, so she had the privilege and entitlement of literacy at that time, which was it's still unique and profound now, but it was maybe more so stark and valuable and in advantageous in times past when education has been harder to come by. Education has always been hard to come by and may yet be harder to come by in the future. But no less in ancient times in China, as is portrayed in this film, that young Ronin had been a disciple and an actual member of a noble family, and then the corrupt and cunning and stealthy and efficient Ronin had infiltrated the royal family and corrupted yet tutored the Ronin, the young girl, and both the corrupt tutor and the accomplished master recognized the brilliance of this disciple, and they were somewhat contending over her discipleship. But within this scene, the disciple has she's taken on the training of the Ronin, who had a partial understanding of the training manual based on the pictures, and then she was able to yet best and further that training with her understanding of the text. But yet the tutor, she lacked the training. She lacked the initiation and the benefit of a teacher and literacy, but she had the benefit of the pictures. And then the disciple had the benefit of the pictures and literacy, and recognized but yet was deprived of the actual teaching and the deeper imparting of the lessons. And Li Mu Bai had all of that, but he may yet didn't have the some of the actual deft and craft of the first tutor, who was she was more self-styled, but she was actually more congruent to her own disingenuous purposes. Whether or not they were righteous or not, they were yet more congruent within the tutor, and she was able to prevail and assail even the master Mubai by being a little bit more congruent than him. He had betrayed the honor of his comrade by seducing his fiance after his comrade had fallen in arms, and he also attempted to seduce this disciple, maybe a little bit against what would have been the disciple's will, which was equally dishonest. Um, and so he paid his life for those treacheries. But there's one scene where he did have a high degree of training and understanding, and so as he's engaging with this disciple who has she's having a conflict of conscience, and she's returning the stolen item, and he had already ferreted and smelled her out, but he did not expose her because he was respecting her family and her own anonymity and potential to live a humble and a happy life, being married off to a auspicious family that she was not interested in. And so he was yet awaiting for her to come back because he anticipated her her equivocation or dally, her wavering in conscience. He had anticipated that, and he was present when she returned, when she went to return the sword. That might be a fictitious and literary license to say that someone would be that cold to actually have a prescience of events and anticipate them. So there's different scenes in that film that are a little bit of a poetic or a literary license, where some of our figures in allegory, even our masters, are maybe yet a little bit more masterful or uncanny than reality would allow for. But sometimes reality is more uncanny than canny, and canny would be more uncanny than uncanny. So nothing's impossible. But all I meant to say is that in this scene between the master who is trying to free himself of the actual blood that's on the sword, and then on him as being connected with the sword as its true owner, and then also maybe you can't own a sword and the sword owns him, but and then this disciple who is engaging with the sword and is playing around with different degrees of training. He's using the oversights and actually some of the unconsciousness within her own statements and behavior as a point of teaching and correction, which is possible for a master. And I think that is actually realistic, and it can be done in real life also. Where sometimes I give an example today of how I walk into somewhere, and I was actually I had walked into a coffee shop with a cup of tea in hand from the competition up the street, because I was trying to check in on an application opportunity that had been given to me by a ranking person at this coffee shop about 2 weeks ago, based on some of my banter and rapport that I had built with them. Also capitalizing on people's on puns within people's statements. So the week before I was there, and a man was giving that ranking person a compliment over the counter, saying, "Thank you, brother." And I was like, "Dang, you get along well with your brother, because me and my brother can't stand each other." And I think it's the devil's not in the details; the devil's in the birth order. And they both appreciated that. And then he encouraged me to apply for that. And then today I walk in there, just cold off of Front Street. I'm saying front like the that's like a old joke. It's like Front Street, and so I walk in cold, and I'm kind of sweating somewhat about a job. I wouldn't do it more than once, because that wouldn't be respectful. But I just showed up once to be proactive. Sometimes we get things done by being proactive. And there was a man standing near the register, and I'm walking up to the register of a coffee shop with a tea in hand that looks like a coffee, about to approach them with a cup of coffee in hand. And then I asked the man if he's in line, and he said, "Oh God, no." And I was like, "Did you just call me God?" And then I was thinking later, I should have been like, "You're much too kind, and what you're calling God wouldn't do me that much of a disservice by holding me to that standard where I can't have fun anymore." But it's just to point out that sometimes we say things very unconsciously when we think we're being conscious. We can be asleep when we think we're being awake, and sometimes we can be awake in our sleep. And there's a need for both of that. But a lot of the things we do say are quite unconscious, even as conscious as we think we are. And maybe the more so conscious you are, the more so asleep you are. So even as we're in waking reality, maybe our deepest dreaming is when we are yet awake, in the absolute terms, and our wakefulness is when we're asleep. I know there's different indigenous people that feel that way, but our statements are a lot of that. Part of it is because we don't look at the etymology of what we say, and then in the one sense, from a proper standpoint, we don't look at the etymology of what we're saying. So like when you say dollar bill like that, a dollar is actually an actual real form of representative currency at different times in history. And then a bill, more so at a lot of times in history, is a debt. And so that you have a positive value, a dollar, and then you have a debt together. So that's an oxymoron when you say dollar bill like that. The scholar Tashriq Bey, who emphasizes etymology, has pointed that out among other oxymorons and other he can go deep into etymology, as it would confound your understanding of history and even reality in time and space. That's understood in how words have been coined and come to be, and is reflected in words, such as currency being related to induction, and moon being related to money, also related to induction, and silver and gold also being related to induction and corresponding with certain planets, and the moon corresponding with attraction, as has been pointed out by a colleague in another forum that I encountered, and all of that, the attraction, the currency, the influences of the local planetary bodies and the broader heavenly bodies are a deeper reality, and it's betrayed in some of the etymology of the basic words that we say while we think we're wide awake, but we are somewhat asleep in absolute terms, and also ignorant of and I don't say ignorant in a pretentious or chauvinistic way, but we're just simply not aware of the deeper reality of the etymology that we say, and some of that's by design, because it's been taken out of both the schools and the books in a lot of ways, because it keeps us limited. That's one of the most effective ways of oppression, according to Tashriq Bey, is to limit understanding. Fundamentally, etymology and history might be the deeper aspects of that, as is possible, to limit people, but then also taking job opportunities and training opportunities, no less than the trades out of high school. The trades, stripping the trades, rewriting the history, and confusing or concealing the etymology are pivotal in the mental oppression, the real oppression that informs all other oppressions. And I've said that I think the outcome, what's realer than oppression, what is the function and the purpose and the outcome of oppression, is gentrification, that is displacing human beings from their right standing and their due in enjoyment of life and liberty across lines of resources, no less than human resources and human social capital. All of that is gentrification, all of that is brutal, and all of that is oppression, and a lot of that is a function of etymology, of limiting etymology, rewriting history, and depriving opportunities for livelihood. But so this is an example of how so sometimes you can play on what people actually say, not having thought about things or actually existing in what's called the present moment. I think when you say present moment, that can also be confusing, because it makes it sound as though there's anything that could not be present. And I think that before, now, beyond, within are nothing different. And as you appreciate that, you can appreciate your own existence, and you can function in what would confound people, where a lot of people are limited by their linear understanding of time. So this person that I bantered with 2 weeks ago, what's called 2 weeks ago, and then I walk in there again, and the person looks at me like they actually couldn't remember giving me a recommendation, a job opportunity, what's called 2 weeks ago, whether they had cognitive dissonance in who they are, or they're just simply limited by their linear understanding of time. They can look at you and not recognize you from what would be called 2 weeks ago, and I can remember where each other was standing, more or less of what I said, more or less the demeanor of each person, and more or less what was going on, and maybe even a few of the other associates and where they had been, among other details of my life, where I maybe don't see the same volume of people as a clerk would in a store, but I see as much volume of people in life, and they have experienced as much water gone down the river as that person has in what's called 2 weeks, yet they're oblivious to their experience of me in what's called 2 weeks ago. And part of that is the limitation of our linear sense of time, and it amounts to different blunders and oversights and dissonance, and it's betrayed in some of our speech. And you can if you practice and you exist and you recognize how you exist, maybe beyond and through what's called linear time, you can sometimes even as I say that, I'm somewhat I'm confounding myself and limiting my scope of agency by talking like that. But as you appreciate what it is to exist, and you also look into learning in history and reading affects your sense of your attention span. Your attention span is also a function of your sense of rhythm, and so a lot of who you get along with or don't get along with. It's not about how smart you are. It's not about how dumb you are. Both smart can help you and hurt you, and dumb can help you and hurt you. And a dynamic is more valuable. But what is more what is more potent is our cadence and our sense of rhythm, both in how we speak and how we move and behave. And that might be more about what chemistry is. Chemistry may, a lot of times we talk about chemistry as being positive and negative, but if reality yet is unified, then positive and negative would be arbitrary because nothing is essentially different than anything else. The only difference would be maybe cadence and timing. And they say that a lot of energy exists like in wavelengths and energy, and so you can abide in a hellhole forever for your whole life, and nothing about that is changing until your mode of energy and your timing changes. So you can stay stuck somewhere for a long, long time, and you don't get any cool points by how long you've been stuck somewhere or even winning. And what's going to change something is when you have a shift. So you shift. Now something's different. So nothing changes until something shifts. And I think that shifting may be more of a function of rhythm and what's called timing, beyond, and maybe spontaneity also, beyond what's called positive and negative, where I think positive and negative may more so be rates or speeds than an inherent property. And I think sometimes also cold and heat are their effects, but the real property of what we're calling cold or heat, I don't know if we really understand that, and how they can exist both together in reality. How can you have anything of cold and still have something of heat, as there's no straight line in existence between anything? There's no ultimate limit between, or threshold between anything or anything else. So how can you have what's called heat and what's called cold if you're not actually having both at the same time? And what you're actually more so experiencing are rates of a cycle. It would be the difference. And then the effect of what that cold effect or that hot effect is the sensation, but it's not the actual reality. The reality is deeper than the sensation. And it might be the same with positive and negative, where the reality of that is deeper than what we appreciate as positive and negative. And positive and negative might actually be the foundation of all of our pain and all of our struggles, is to think that anything is different than anything else, and that you have difference. So I think a lot of we as humans, somehow we can't think outside of contrast. Our visual acuity has very little meaning outside of contrast. Maybe you could say the same of our other senses. I don't know, but I know our vision is not doesn't really have a lot of value without contrast. So we appreciate most things in terms of contrast, and we suffer from that. And I was putting in another video that a lot of people cannot stomach the sight of a mulatto like myself, and that's because a mulatto, all people are balanced and dynamic because its existence is balanced and dynamic, such as a mulatto. But it's a little bit more stark when you look at a mulatto, because your arbitrary distinctions of what is a black person, what is a white person, that you've grown to appreciate. Your other distinctions, like your religious sensibilities, your moral sensibilities, your professional sensibilities, your social sensibilities, your cultural sensibilities, a lot of them don't have appreciable value outside of contrast. What is this without that being against it? What is that without this being for it? Is very difficult. And so when you look at a mulatto person, it's difficult not to appreciate that this universe is essentially unified and dynamic at the same time. And it's not different in someone that's not mulatto, but it's not ignorable in someone who's mulatto. So the mulatto challenges you because they challenge you that this existence is different, you are different, and nothing is different between existence, you, and the mulatto. And that challenges you, and it's difficult to stomach that for a lot of people. But yet I'm saying that the deeper aspect of that is that we may yet appreciate things in terms of contrast, and it's difficult to appreciate the other contrast in your reality or your understanding of your reality as you look at a mulatto, because the mulatto is as balanced as you are, as the universe is, but it's stark and apparent in a mulatto. But I wanted to say also, yes, our what we call positive and negative may actually be simply different rates of the same reality of a cycle, and kind of like as you watch. So maybe more than what would be energy changing energy level. Like they would say that this has been added to this energy, so now it's over here and it's going by like that. And a lot of that might be similar to, like, if you were to watch one of the more beautiful and daunting things you'll ever look at is if you see some young girls playing double dutch. Like we talk about how cool, we think how cool and coordinated and agile boys are playing sports. But have you ever actually appreciated some girls playing either dancing or double dutching, and how they can jump inside of a rope and keep pace with it and get in and out of it? I think that's a lot of how our actual molecules exist, when you appreciate in terms of chemistry, and you can't get into or out of a double dutch without abiding within certain cadences. More so would be more than it yet does take different cadences represent different energy and effort output, but the cadence is more so important than the energy output. And you could almost say the energy output attends the cadence and is a shadow of the cadence, but what's more so profound is the cadence. And so that's really a lesson in itself to watch some young girls double dutching, and it just goes to show that this reality might be more so about rhythm than energy in itself. And with the right rhythm, energy is an afterthought, before and after. If you're at a rhythm, you put some music in. You could be tired. You had a long day, but you really put some cold music that was more so profound than the actual harmony. I think in the melody is the rhythm. The rhythm is the deeper aspect. So you appreciate you appreciate, so you have rhythm, harmony, and melody is what's appreciated as music. One of my more blunt and cold-hearted music teachers taught me that, and I don't think I benefited a lot from him other than him challenging me in his discipline. But he said in music you have rhythm, harmony, and melody. But if you look at that deeper, the harmony in the melody is yet also rhythm, because these are different frequencies. So the notes, whether individual notes put together would be a melody, and the relationship between the notes of a melody, each of those notes are distinguishable by the cadence of the frequency, the pitch, and that's yet also a function in reality of a rhythm. And then the relationship between the notes of the pitches of the melody are yet another dimension of rhythm, the rhythm upon the rhythm, the cadence within the cadence. CDA, ADC. I'm not the best with that, but that's just an example of you're yet dealing with rhythm. And then if you were to take the harmony, whether the harmony is attended by rhythm, by percussion, a rhythm within the percussion, harmony as in multiple pitches, attended by maybe a melody, or maybe a counterpointed melody, which is like two or more melodies together. And there can also be counterpoint between one melody and rhythm, or one melody and harmony, or multiple harmonies, or multiple melodies and multiple harmonies, or multiple melodies and a harmony. All that can yet be broken down to rhythm. Is that you have pitch and rest. So within a pitch, you have rhythm, but all the rhythm really is silence and enunciation. And somewhere between as the sound oscillates from up and down, left and right, is it wavers like that. All music, you can say all sound is wavering. But within the wavering, you actually have a kinetic aspect, a mobile aspect, motion, and then you have a static dimension. Arthur Avalon has said that there's no motion without a static support, and you can maybe also say there's no static support without motion. What would it take to achieve a perpetual motion machine? I think you would have to yet create another universe, and we can maybe say that even this universe is not a perpetual motion machine, because some people, such as the Indians of India, they have talked about things like yugas. I think a yuga, they have different designations for incredible expanses of time, of what's called time, and in cycles. Because I have spoke out against our understanding of linear time, but I shall not speak out against cycles. And we yet do have cycles in our what we appreciate as a year, whether these are mounting and accruing or not. We yet are abiding within a cycle of some kind, and that can't be denied. And then these have been recognized by other cultures as being deeper and more profound than we can typically grasp. And one of the one increment or unit that I don't know if we can really fathom, but what we can approach would be something called a yuga. And we're currently in something, according to some thought, it's called a Kali Yuga, which is a daunting and a somewhat ruthless expanse of a long period of cycles. Um, but all these cycles, even the broader cycles of what we call the universe itself, are yet exhaustible at a certain point, because you can't have activity without rest, nor rest without activity. So as much as things are said to or are thought to have existed and further exist, they shall yet one day amount to a cessation, it is thought, and all that energy will be spent. But perhaps the deeper reverberations and implications of the energy that has been spent will be a function of a further rebirth. So it said that all things are come into existence and out of existence, no less than people, no less than regions, no less than planets, no less than mountains, no less than stars, no less than galaxies, no less than a nebula, no less than universe, in a universe or universes. At a certain point, they may become spent, but they may actually become rebirthed against their will as a function of the energy that has been spent. Because energy cannot be created or destroyed, it is thought, and energy is maybe vibration, and that's dynamism, static, kinetic, and static energy back and forth. But with the music, still, it is a function of rhythm. Even the percussion, the percussion is actually not different than a note, because it's oscillating the same way. It's still, you could actually appreciate percussion as a note. And if you were to look at percussion in like a DAW, a digital audio workstation, the percussive unit can correspond to an actual musical note, and it exists on the same range as what we appreciate as a musical note, but maybe the quality or the timbre would be different than a musical note. I can't speak on that terms, but I do know that yet a percussive unit or value is actually not essentially different than a note. And then a note is not a note is not essentially different than a percussive unit, whether that note be a individual note as a function of melody, or a individual note combined with other individual notes to amount to harmony. Whether or not that harmony is counterpointed with another harmony or another melody or melodies, is yet still, it's still yet actually a percussive value, all of that, and therefore a rhythmic value. And more, many people would say that the silence is more potent than the actual enunciated sound. The silence is more valuable in rhythm and in music. That silence I just did was more intense than all the things I've said in this video and may say further. And that's an example of how the silence is more potent than the sound. Yet the silence doesn't have meaning without sound, and the sound doesn't have meaning without silence. So that's a paradox, and a dynamic paradox that you have right there. But I just wanted to say that a lot of things are about rhythm, if not all things are about rhythm. What we appreciate as music, I don't know if anybody appreciates anything more than music. And what is music? That, according to what I have just said, if it is true, is that it's a function of rhythm first and foremost, and primarily. And then so maybe our what we call hot and cold, a function of rhythm, and maybe our entire reality as it has been appreciated as being chemistry first and foremost. What physics do you have without chemistry? What discipline of any kind do you have without being either supported by chemistry? The realities of chemistry gave us the time and space to consider and fathom another discipline, maybe even the most pure of disciplines, as being what's thought of as mathematical units, which are purely conceptual. As profound as that is, how can we exist to appreciate that without being supported by dynamics of chemistry somehow? And then yet deeper, the chemistry is a function of what's called I think attraction and repulsion. And then that is yet a function of, I think, of mantra, according to Arthur Avalon, is the silent mantra of the universe that we all recite unaware, breathing in and out. We at seldom times become aware of it, as we may have to, or even to manage it, because you can't perform many things, including procreation, without changing your cadence of breathing. Some of that's conscious, more so is unconscious. And even as you appreciate it as being conscious, that has come to your conscious awareness primarily from being unconscious. You become conscious of your breathing when your subconscious made you become conscious of breathing in order to maybe adjust to your environment. And that's true in lovemaking. But I'm talking like I'm the dopest love maker. I may have tried it once or twice, or thought myself to have. But and some would say less is more. But however much you say less is probably double that is the closer to the real number. So I can't argue with any of that, or actually flex any of that either. But all I meant to say is that the deeper thing would be the mantra, the life and death force that are not either possible without the other. We're living and dying constantly. We're breathing and exhaling. But that I think that the breathing is more so a polarizing feature, and we're engaging with the polarity of reality. And I think that hot and cold might actually be more so a polar, something polar about that. Where does our weather occur from? It occurs from the poles. What are the poles? The poles are magnetic. What is magnetic? Magnetic is polarizing. I think as we're breathing, we're more so polarizing ourselves than drawing sustenance in itself. Who could eat constantly all day long for their whole life and not get sick and die? Who could drink constantly for their whole life and not get sick and die? Therefore, who could draw sustenance, be it oxygen or carbon dioxide, constantly and not get sick and die if it is a nutrient in itself, oxygen being a nutrient? I think that it's more so polarizing is what it's doing, and we're polarizing ourselves as we breathe, and we're also recharging as we breathe in our sleep because our heart cannot proceed without polarity, and we cannot proceed without breathing. But it had been a mantra according to Arthur Avalon because all things are a function of energy, and energy can be appreciated in terms of vibration, and vibration can be appreciated in terms of sound, and sound can be appreciated in terms of consonant and vowel, and consonant and vowel can be appreciated within the unit ohm, as is chanted by monks, and Om can be appreciated within as being a mantra that is the Ahapa the mantra that all beings recite, aware and unaware, um, with and without their you shall exist so long as you recite the Ahapa mantra, and the universe itself may exist so long as it recites the Ahapa mantra. And I would almost say, if I'd be bold enough, that what we consider God may exist in a existent or a in a manifest term, so long as that is so long as animated beings. All of us animated beings can be appreciated as something called jiva or hiva in Indian terms, and that can be appreciated collectively and respectively. As I speak in this video, I'm speaking as hiva. As you listen, you are listening as hiva. As we exist respectively and collectively, we are both hiva, and that is for the entire universe. And that entire universe is tasked with, you people call it duty. The author, the Ordo Osho, has said that duty is a four-letter word, and even what we call God is a four-letter word, as it applies to duty and doing things against our will. But yet we do have the duty to breathe, to recite the mantra, and that might actually be true of what we call God, whether respectively or collectively, Hiva or Hivatma. The individual or the collective must yet breathe and recite that mantra, and as we do or do not, we exist or do not. And so it feels good to breathe. But I was gonna say, I'm getting just a little bit sidetracked. But what I wanted to close this one out with is say that in that film with the great Mumbai, so he was engaging with the unconsciousness of her actual statements and her emotions in order to correct and chasten her. At one point, he wrested the greatest of swords and parried her and tapped her out in what would have been a lethal blow. I think that's called a coup de grace. They say like coup d'etat is like a lethal move that like topples an empire or a leader in certain terms, but just coup d'etat, I think that means a lethal checkmate move. But I think a coup de grace is a checkmate blow. I had got that from my brother, and then I think that so as this disciple is calls herself messing around with this sword with her somewhat with her limited scope of training. Even by, you could maybe say, he was limited in that he was engaging the disciple and his love interest somewhere outside of honor, but yet she was more so, I would think, unconscious. and or at least unseasoned. And as she's engaging with this greatest of swords, he was able to yet parry her and then check her with what would have been a coup de grace had they actually been going full speed. And it just showed that he was yet able to improvise and check and teach her based on her own oversights that are a function of unconsciousness, though she thinks she's conscious. It has somewhat similar to what I do when I'm giving people a hard time and giving myself a hard time sticking my foot in my mouth, because I'm also if I'm being good natured and bantering, I'm giving myself as much, if not more, hard time as anyone else, and that's more so endearing and enlightening than giving another person a hard time in itself. So if we're giving other people a hard time, we should equally be giving ourselves a hard time to make it cool and fun. But I wanted to say that a lot of what is beautiful in life. So you have these different chemical chemistry is it's the most straightforward and regimented thing that can be appreciated. Yet it's also the most spontaneous and eccentric thing, and that's what's dynamic. You have the predictable motions of atomic and subatomic particles as is understood by what's called science, and I think that science is a blunt, brutal word, but art is much colder and finer, even whether that be medical. The author Nicholas Taleb has said that the medicinal practices have been appreciated as arts in the first place, and were more beautiful, sublime, and even exact from that standpoint. And then they become more so blunt and brutal as they become what's called scientific. And part of that is based upon dynamics between finance and medical initiative that is it's more so mass produced. So therefore, to mitigate oversight with an error, which I don't think anyone can account for all oversight and error, even what we call God, is because it's yet vital. You actually can't improve without mistakes. So what's called in order for something to be called God and living in the truest sense of living, there would have to be mistakes, and therefore improvement, and therefore learning, and therefore vitality, and therefore viability. So it can be reasoned that even God can make a mistake, and or if God is perfect, maybe the mistake is part of being perfect. But yet the mistakes do occur, or anomalies at least occur. A better word than mistake would be anomaly. And I think that even what's great is not without use of anomaly. But what you have like in terms of chemistry, but maybe also music and art, is you have structure and improvisation. Both the structure is a form of cadence and timing, and yet the spontaneity and eccentricity is yet also a function of a rhythm and timing, but it's more mysterious and deep and unfathomable and inscrutable on the surface, and that's why it's enjoyable and appealing. And the cleaner and the more you abide within rhythm, the more is the potential for spontaneity, and the more is the appreciation of spontaneity is also the opportunity for rhythm and stability. So you need both rhythm and instability to be dynamic. You need both rhythm and improvisation to be dynamic. I think maybe if I wrote music, I do improvising on some of these music channels, these videos. If it were all completely rhythmic, and if it were all completely rhythmic and intentional, it wouldn't be as compelling. But if it were all improvised and spontaneous, it wouldn't also be compelling. You need a combination of what's rhythmic and can be anticipated, and improvisation and spontaneity, as you do in humor and banter, and as you do in life, in consciousness and unconsciousness. You need the rhythm and the improvisation. And the only thing that gives the true improvisation, the true randomness that is possible, that is necessary, is a combination of repetition and practice, and also the vicissitudes and the eventualities and circumstances of living reality. Both the distractions and the focus are both necessary in life to give enough randomness to make life viable, and to confound ourselves, which are a part of what's called great in God, and that even ourselves collect respectively and what's called maybe God need to be challenged and surprised in order to be dynamic and evade the fetter of predictability. Predictability is not healthy, but complete chaos is also not healthy. You need both, And the only thing real enough to confuse all of us is our actual choices and loves and fears and hates, our free will. Peace.